The kit replaces the factory intake system.
So we created that word.
Welcome to another how-to video from PWC Muscle. I'm Joe Zamataro, and today we're going to show you how to remove and reinstall your supercharger on a 2004 Sea-Doo RXP for our Sea-Doo Supercharger Rebuild Service. Your Sea-Doo Supercharger must be rebuilt every 2 years or 100 hours, whichever comes first, and our rebuild service guarantees a quality and precision rebuild and also saves you money from the dealer. Pulling the supercharger is a fairly simple process. It will require us to put the RXP into service mode, disconnect the exhaust from the exhaust manifold, and remove the air hoses connected to the supercharger. So let's get started. First, with the seat off, we'll move the coolant overflow reservoir out of the way. Depress the 2 tabs on each side and it will slide up. There are 5 6mm hex bolts holding the engine cowling in place, one on the rear behind the BRP logo, 2 clamps inside the hull, and one on either side of the glove compartment. Start at the rear by removing the logo cover and using a 6mm socket remove the rear bolt. A 6mm Allen can work in a pinch, but it will take more time. Now loosen the side clamps. The bolts don't have to be removed, just loosen enough to allow the clamps to come off the hull. And finally remove the 2 bolts next to the glove compartment. After this we can remove the engine cowling, being careful to allow the vent tube to clear the hull. With the cowling removed, we have significantly more room to work. Throughout the process, it will be necessary to move the coolant reservoir to keep it out of our way. And as a tip, you can minimize fiberglass rash by using a paper towel roll cut lengthwise to create a barrier between your arms and the hull. The next step will be removing the hoses from the supercharger. Start by loosening the hose clamps on the hose between the supercharger and air intake. If you have the factory style clamps, you can use a flathead screwdriver to carefully pry the clamp open, being sure not to damage the hose in the process. Replace these with standard 2.5-inch screw clamps. Next, we can slip off the hose going from the supercharger to the intake and place it aside. The hose going from the supercharger to the throttle body is next. Loosen the hose clamps and remove the hose, also setting it aside. The next steps will allow us to move the exhaust back to create more clearance. Start by loosening the hose clamps for the coolant lines located on the top and bottom of the exhaust J-pipe. Disconnect these hoses and loosen the T-clamp holding the J-pipe to the exhaust manifold. You don't have to fully remove the clamp to slide the exhaust back, just loosen enough for it to be freed. Now we remove the strap holding the water box in place. This is one of the more difficult parts of the removal, but pliers can help grip the strap, making it easier. Once the strap is removed, the entire assembly can be slid back, giving us the necessary clearance to remove the supercharger. There are 3 final bolts holding the supercharger in place. It's hard to see the bottom bolts with the supercharger installed, but with it removed, you can see the mounting points. You'll need either an E8 Torx socket or 8mm socket, depending on the year, and 6mm hex box wrench or 8mm box wrench, depending on the year. Use the box wrench to remove the top bolt. This is one of the more tedious parts of the removal, as you can only do a few turns at a time. Once done, use the socket to remove the lower bolts. It might require a bit of wiggling, but the supercharger can now be removed. Carefully slide the supercharger back and out from its mounting point. Plug the remaining hole with a clean shop rag to prevent anything from dropping into the engine case. Once your supercharger is removed, visit pwcmuscle.com, purchase the Supercharger Rebuild Service, and send your supercharger in to get rebuilt. For more information on our rebuild service, you can watch this video, and this link will take you directly to the page where you can purchase the service. After the supercharger is rebuilt, we can reinstall it. Installation is the exact opposite of removal. We start by remounting the supercharger. You may need to spin the impeller to line up the gears and allow it to slide into place. Apply red LOCTITE to the 3 mounting bolts and torque them to 10 Newton meters. Next, slide the exhaust back into its original position. Reinstalling the water box holding strap is just as much of a pain as it was removing, but again, using pliers helps. Tighten the T-clamp holding the exhaust J-pipe to the exhaust manifold, reinstall the cooling hoses, and tighten their hose clamps. Reinstall the hose between the supercharger and throttle body and tighten the hose clamps. We suggest using screw-type hose clamps, but if you have an upgraded supercharger, use the T-style clamps to handle the higher pressure. Reinstall the other hose that goes between the supercharger and the air intake and tighten the corresponding hose clamps. The engine cowling can now be placed back onto the hull. You may need to fiddle with it a bit to get the clamps back into position. Next, we reinstall the front bolts near to the glove compartment, tighten the side clamps, then install the rear screw and cover.
And that's it. If you have any questions, you can always post in the comments section or on our forums at pwcextreme.com. Be sure to also subscribe to get more video updates from PWC Muscle. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.